Hello, and welcome to the Faith Science Podcast. My name is Tyler Bublitz, and welcome back to the second Sunday after Epiphany for the week of January 19th, 2025, and excited to have you here. I'm excited to get into this week's podcast, and I'm excited to be in this Epiphany season as we are continuing to be going after that light. It is such an amazing time of year, and as we're in the Northern Hemisphere, if you are experiencing that lack of light, we've been slowly seeing more and more light come. Unfortunately, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, it's the opposite. But that aspect of also gaining that light, I think, really plays well into this season as we are continuing to learn here what all of Jesus is about. And we're going to get into that a little bit more this week. But it also kind of leads into a little bit of our question from last week, which was, where are you seeing impact that you can make in the community and in the ecosystem? And I think one of the biggest things is continuing to look at ways that we can plug in and be part of both our communities and our ecosystems. I think that's one of the things that we often underestimate. The impact of what one person can make in a kid's life, I think, is a big one. The impact of what you can do in a small area of land that can impact a whole community, I think, is huge. And I think getting into like what we talked about last week, it doesn't take much to make a large impact. It doesn't take these necessarily huge monumental things. It's the starting of releasing birds back into an area that's going to hopefully restore a whole ecosystem. The steps that we take can be very small that make huge differences over the long run. And I think it's something that as humans, we often overlook. But in doing that, we often miss some of the blessings and gifts that can come from that. And I think that's one of the things that we need to continue to be working on and thinking about. Small changes, small things magnify into bigger things. This podcast happened 1 week at a time. It's not like I suddenly jumped ahead 300 plus weeks. You have to start 1 week at a time. So I think that's one of the things that we often overlook, and the impact that we can make within people. It's 1 week at a time. It's one visit at a time. And thus this makes big impact over the long haul. So let's just jump into it this week. The Old Testament reading is out of Isaiah chapter 62, the first 5 verses of it. And this is a moment here where Jerusalem is going through some difficult times, but recognizing that the Lord will give them this glory that has been promised to them. And in that, we will start to see the beauty of who God really is, that God does not forsake them, but yet sees them as this royal diadem, something that should be pursued and longed after and go after. And we get in verse 5, as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your builder marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you. This idea of how God is excited about us being around and being around us and gathering us up to be able to show the creation of what God has done, I think is a beautiful image for us to be thinking about. The psalm that goes with that is Psalm 36, verses 5 to 10. This then builds off of that is when we recognize the steadfast love that God has for us, we are able to start seeing the blessings that are then coming from it. We are able to see the mighty mountains and the righteousness and judgment of what God has done in right ways. We've been able to then see the love and refuge that God has taken for us. We are able to see the abundance that God does provide us. We are able to see the life that God provides us and realize how beautiful that actually is for us to continue to move forward. So I think it's this moment where we then are able to be consumed with the self less and able to see at a broader scale what is going on around us. The New Testament text or epistle text this week is out of 1 Corinthians chapter 12, the first 11 verses of it. This is one of my favorite books of the Bible, and I think this is beautiful for us to recognize that, one, there's not the separation of peoples that we typically like to do, but recognizing that each of us are given gifts and different gifts in that. And it's the same Spirit that is giving us these gifts. But out of these gifts, then recognizing that the gifts that we are given, we then should be pursuing and not be envious necessarily of the gifts that other people are given, that each of us is given a gift and that we are all then becoming part of the body in utilizing our gifts. And some of these can be different from each other, as in speaking in prophecy or discerning spirits or various types of tongues or interpretations of tongues or working in powerful deeds or healing in the Spirit. It's all being activated by the same Spirit, and recognizing these differing gifts and being able to pull them out of us to be able to have God be on display using us and our natural abilities of what God has given us. The gospel text this week is out of John chapter 2, the first 11 verses of this. This is the wedding at Cana, and you have where Mary and Jesus and the disciples are there, and Mary comes to Jesus and they've run out of wine. And Mary kind of starts insinuating this, telling the servants, do whatever he tells you to do. Jesus then has them take these large jars and fills them with water. And this is where Jesus then turns the water into wine. And then the whole thing of typically the better wine was served at the beginning and the inferior wine after people have had a few drinks was served. And thus this was the opposite. And this was a sign of the glory, and his disciples then are believing in him. This is the first real miracle that we have. And this then is this moment where we recognize that it's almost Mary who is pushing Jesus into the ministry here, that it's time to take these steps, time to move forward. And this is a moment then that is a huge turning point in Jesus' life and leads the disciples and us into, okay, what does it mean to be both the fully divine and fully human? But before we jump into how faith and science come together this week, we have to do a shameless plug. Working Preacher, if you haven't checked out Working Preacher, I'd highly recommend it. Between the Sermon Brainwaves podcasts, their commentaries, their discussions, since I'm not an ordained minister, I use them on a weekly basis to help give me some ideas and directions and ways to be thinking about the text in different ways. And if you are using this text to help prepare you for the upcoming week, I'd highly recommend checking out Working Preacher. I'd also highly recommend checking out the Revised Common Lectionary coming from Vanderbilt's Divinity Library. I really enjoy how they lay out the text week to week. They also have all the different liturgical calendars in here, so you can take a look at what's coming, what has been, but there's also art, prayers, hymns, colors, daily devotions. If you're, again, utilizing this resource to help prepare you, and as we are trying to prepare ourselves week after week for these texts, I'd highly recommend checking out the Revised Common Lectionary coming from Vanderbilt's Divinity Library. Finally, I'd also recommend checking out the Green Blades Preaching Roundtable and the Green Blades Rising publication. This is either a weekly reflection or a monthly newsletter. It takes in ecological echoes, implications, and urgencies, along with different ideas to be thinking about within your preaching. It's a great way to be able to take some of these different mere biological or natural ideas that are maybe a little bit different, thinking outside the typical preaching box, and being able to bring that into an homily or a sermon, or just even preparing you for worship week to week. So if you haven't checked out the Green Blades Preaching Roundtable or the Green Blades Rising publications, that'll be the first link down in the show notes. Being here in John and seeing this miracle, I think it's interesting to see this moment here where suddenly we are getting Jesus being pushed. Jesus is getting pushed in the aspect of Mary coming to him and saying they're out of wine, and Jesus responding in verse 4, "Woman, what concern is that to me and to you? My hour has not yet come." And that's when Mary decides, no, your time has come. Do whatever he tells you. And so then they take these large purification jars and Jesus sends them out. And this begins Jesus' ministry. There's a lot of the story we don't have here. We don't have a lot of the growing years of Jesus, and it's probably something that has been discussed between Mary and Jesus quite often. Jesus being a little bit different than probably a lot of the other kids, and also just his pursuit of being able to spend time in the temple, as we saw a few weeks ago, but also just this idea of Mary probably seeing things as he was growing up, which In the other Gospels, the Gospel of Mary, there's some weird stories there that we won't get into this week, but the idea that as Jesus was growing up, there was probably some interesting conversations back and forth between Mary and Jesus. But here we have this moment where Mary is really kind of grilling Jesus here. Yes, you say that this is not your hour is not yet come, but yet I disagree. I disagree. It is time, Jesus, to take that leap, to take that step, to move forward, and challenges Jesus to move and take that step. It's a moment where we really see the humanness and then also the divineness of Jesus coming out in this moment. It is moving Jesus into the beginning of Jesus's ministry. So as I was thinking about this, I decided to think on, well, who's done that in our lives? Who are the people that challenge us to move forward? And what makes those certain people memorable versus other people? And it's funny because you would think there has been a lot of research on this, and there has and hasn't been at the same time. Because you're talking about teaching and coaching, and yes, there has been research on it, but also there's certain times where we're narrowly focused on what we're actually looking for, which makes it actually hard to take at a broad scope here. But I did find a couple different articles that kind of help with what makes a good coach, what makes a good teacher. And there are some common or typical things that we can think about here. First and foremost, self-efficacy, being ethical, having good morals. And I think we can agree and see that here Jesus obeying his mother, even though he kind of rolls his eyes maybe a little bit, still shows that there is this mutual respect. And again, it makes it easier for people to follow somebody like that. The next one that you find is hope, being able to believe in the person in who you are coaching, believe in the person that you are teaching, believe in them being able to make that next step. Optimism and resilience. Optimism to be able to help encourage them and helping them see the plus sides even as things get difficult, and resilience to continue to bounce back after things don't necessarily go their way. I was able to get an abstract. I wasn't actually able to get the whole article, but again, going through this abstract, if going self-awareness, honesty, sincerity, competence, reliability, the ability to focus on others, positive, being able to build trust in relationships is really important. Effortless communication, transparent relationships, high levels of energy dividends, being able to give and give and give. But I think one of the things that I did find that was a really good video that goes into what makes a good teacher is listening. Listening to be able to hear what are the aspirations, the goals of the student or whoever that is, to be able to help move them forward, being able to help know that you care and love and cherish the time that you have with them, that you're actually listening. If we take all these different skills and abilities that we've talked about and have been researched on good coaching and good teaching, I think that's where we can start seeing Mary do some of these here. Mary obviously then believes in what Jesus can do and realizes that this is an opportunity. And it, like a good coach, being able to pull that out of Jesus in this moment and encourages Jesus to take that step, encouraging to make those first steps. We also see the hope and optimism. There's going to be built-in trust that they've had over the years with Mary being Jesus's mother, and the trust that both ways is being demonstrated here. Respect that is being demonstrated here. There's a lot there. But I also think about, from this perspective, the beauty of what is then able to come. Because Jesus fulfills and obeys and listens and steps into this role that is being called out of him, that the humanness is being told to step aside for the divine to be able to enter in, the impact that that makes on others around them, The impact of others being able to see the beauty in what has actually happened. The impact and beauty for us to be able to see the beauty, what is going on. And that's where I think the recognition of what we get here in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, of talking about how each of us have different gifts. That's the beauty of what a coach can do, is recognizing these different skills and abilities, believing in those people to be able to take that next step, being able to recognize what is their skills and abilities, and being able to then bring them all together, being able to get a unit of people to work together, being able to challenge an individual to go beyond what they thought they were capable of. Mary challenging Jesus to go beyond what Jesus thinks he is capable or should be doing at this time. Yet, Mary says, no, I don't think so. The Holy Spirit guiding her in that. The Psalm recognizing when we go and do these things, we see the beauty of God and recognize that God does not abandon us in these times. Instead, God pursues us to be able to step into these beautiful challenges that we are now walking into as we follow and obey what God is challenging us to do. I think a lot of times in life, these are things and skills that we are looking for. Like we talked about last week, going back and thanking teachers, but I also think about coaches. Coaches being able to challenge you to go a little bit further, seeing that you're not setting the bar high enough for yourself, recognizing the ability that is within you to go a little bit deeper, to go a little bit harder, to be able to take those extra steps, to be able to get toward the goals and accomplishments that you have. I ran cross country in high school, and I was not a great cross country runner, but I distinctly remember one time I was one of the last people in the room, and we would typically write down goals for ourselves, and we'd give them to the coach before we leave, and that was the night before our meet. And I distinctly remember the one time handing mine in, the coach looked at me and she told me, Tyler, you can do better. Go further. Challenge yourself more. And I think that is the beauty of what a coach can do. The hope and optimism that is in that, but also recognizing the ability that is within you that you don't necessarily recognize. Jesus recognizes maybe the ability of what Jesus can do, but doesn't think it's the right time to do it. Mary then acts as a good coach to be able to draw that out of Jesus. The trust and relationship is obviously already there, but it forces and challenges us to make those steps forward. Forces us and challenges us to think about things. It forces us and challenges us to listen. Because that's the side of the story that I don't think is here. Mary, how many times has she probably heard these different things that the Holy Spirit has talked to her about that Jesus is going to do? But also, how about the goals and aspirations that Jesus has within private conversations that he's had with his mother? This moment where Mary then is able to challenge Jesus, and not to say, prove that you are the Son of Man. Know that, no, I know you can do this. It is now your time to step into this. It is now your time to accept the next challenge. It is now your time to move forward. It is now your time to recognize the beauty of what God has given you as a gift and to utilize it. I think a lot of times that part gets hard for us. We recognize maybe the skills and abilities that we have, but we don't necessarily always want to fully admit it. Because then when we do, we realize that God's going to use it in different ways, and maybe in ways that we're not comfortable. Jesus isn't comfortable here. Jesus is getting pushed out of his human comfort in this moment. But we recognize at the end, because of what Jesus has done, we are able to see the beauty of what Jesus actually has done. Others are able to see the beauty of what has happened. We are able to actually see God in these moments because we were challenged, because we were pushed, because we saw what was now capable for us. I know January is a time of the year where a lot of people make a lot of resolutions and a lot of goals and aspirations for their own life. And we often by this point have given up on them. We make these goals, we strive for them, and then we put them aside. But within our own faith, we should be taking goals and trying to make steps forward, trying to figure out ways to make that next step, to strive to move forward. Part of the reason that I have these summary podcasts that go through different things and I lay out what are some of the ideas and things that I'm looking at and striving toward. I maybe don't give you the whole picture, but I give you a very good headline version of what I'm looking at, because it's also holding me accountable, pushing me, challenging me to continue to move forward. Make New Year's resolutions. We're doing that for ourselves. And just like we see here, Jesus, the human side of ourselves, wants to prevent us from moving forward to seeing the beauty of what can happen. I know one within my life is when I got engaged, I was much heavier than I was really wanting to be. And there was multiple different events on why I kind of really needed to do this. But it gave me a good excuse. I was by myself. It was the middle of 2020 and I went through and lost a good chunk of weight. And I've had some of it come back. And yes, I'm trying to lose some of it partially because doctors have told me it would be better if you're a little lighter than you are. But then there's also things and challenges and abilities that I also set for myself. And to be able to do those, I need to continue to work on myself. So there's things that I have been challenging myself this year to be doing. And I don't know if I'm going to do the whole year, but I know right now this is something that I'm really trying to do. And I've set ideas on what I think I can do and slowly progressing toward them. And in that, as I slowly achieve some of these goals, and right now a lot of it is running, but also doing some lifting weights in there as well, I get to see the beauty of what my body can actually do. I get to rediscover the feelings of my body and really get in tune with my body. The beauty that I've actually discovered is my body. Not just what it looks like, but what it feels like. What I'm able and being capable of as I continue to work on it day after day after day after day. Recognizing the beauty that is around me within my own body. I think that's one of the things that we have to recognize here. Jesus, in this moment, kind of saying it's not my time, but getting pushed, ends up seeing the actual beauty of what Jesus can do. Recognizing the impact that Jesus has, not just for Jesus' self, but for others. And again, it gets back to almost the question that we had for last week. We don't always recognize the beauty of what we are as individuals able to do that makes big impact. That's where each of us need to be a coach, and each of us need to also be coachable. We need to be like a good teacher and listen to the students just as we are expecting the students to listen to us. And I think in doing that, the more we rehearse that and the more we start recognizing the beauty that comes from that, I think there is also the ability for us to start actually hearing the Holy Spirit more and more, because we are actually living into ourselves, living into this ability of what God has created us to be. And in doing that, we are actually listening and hearing the Holy Spirit and living it out and building that relationship. Is coaching easy? No. Is leading easy? Not necessarily. Is listening easy? No, it's not. But when we do it, we feel good at the end. I know one other story for me. When my wife graduated college, I was more excited about her graduating college than when I graduated college. And there's various reasons why, and I don't have time to get into that tonight. Part of it was there was an aspect of I was walking alongside her, encouraging her, being a mentor, being a coach, pushing her, challenging her, being her biggest cheerleader all at the same time, so that when we accomplished the goal, I was overwhelmed with the sense of joy of what she was able to do and accomplish. And I think that's what God does with us when we actually fulfill some of these things that God enables our bodies to be able to do, or enables us to be able to do, and wants us to be able to experience that. But we often cut ourselves short. And then in doing that, we're missing so much of the glory of God in doing that, because we cut ourselves short. So the question I have for you is, where are you cutting yourself short? Where are you cutting yourself short of being able to see what God is really trying to do? Where are you cutting yourself short being able to see what God is really trying to do? If we allow ourselves to go deeper, if we allow ourselves to be coached, if we allow ourselves to push that little bit further within our own faith, what is going to happen? We're going to see God in new ways and in ways that we weren't expecting. We're going to be able to see the Holy Spirit coaching us through various different forms. And then we can actually see the beauty of what God is doing. Don't be discouraged. Even Jesus needed a push. But I think this is a recognition for us, especially early on in the year, that take that step. Challenge yourself. Be that coach. Be that person that's coachable. Take those steps. And remember that we should be listening. In order for us to be able to be coachable and to be a coach, we have to be able to listen to the goals and aspirations. Know when not to push too much, too hard, too far. And I think also for us to keep listening to our coach coaching us, saying, you got more in the tank than that. Let's keep going. You can do this. And I think maybe, just maybe, if we really strive and listen for what God is trying to do this year, maybe we're really going to see God in new and miraculous ways. We get out of our humanness and chase our divine. So, we'll wrap this up as we always do. I pray God blesses you through your faith and amazes you through science.